A gute Woche. This afternoon, the Rebbe began the Farbrengen that this Shabbos, first and foremost, the inyonim of this Shabbos is the fact that it's the Yortzeit of the Rebbe Maharash. And as we know, he is the one that said the famous expression of L'katchila Riba, which means, as the Rebbe Maharash explained it himself, that the world says, the Welt sagt, as mekenish darunter geht men a Riba. If you can't go under, then you go over. When ich sage, and I say, the Rebbe Maharash continued, as megeit l'katchila a Riba, that the proper approach is that initially, right away, to go that approach to every matter of Yiddishkeit should be in a way of above and beyond any type of limitation. L'katchila a Riba. And Rabbi says he's the author of this saying. The saying was related to us through the Frierdiker Rebbe. And the Rebbe added on, it wasn't the Rebbe Rashab who was the Mamalamokim, the Frierdiker Rebbe's father, who was the son of the Rebbe Maharash. It is not known to us that he should have stressed this concept much, or even the Frierdiker Rebbe in his early years, but it was in the later years of the Frierdiker Rebbe when he related this quotation of the Rebbe Maharash, and he asked that it be publicized and that it reaches to every Yid and it has a shaykhs to every Yid, that the approach of every Yid in the Yonam of Yiddishkeit should be in a way of l'katchila riba. That has to be our attitude, take every matter above and beyond any type of limitation or interference and so forth. Even though that this concept of l'katchila riba is not something which is mentioned in halacha, it's not something which is mentioned in Shulchan Aruch, but it's based on what we would call Haine de Amre Inshe. It's based on an expression of people. But nonetheless, it was already publicized, and it came like a kind of a minig Yisrael to adhere to this concept of l'katchila riba. Especially today, when today is the day of the Yortzeit of the author of this quotation. Madach we find regarding a Yom Haledes, a birthday. Medrash Yerushalmi tells us that that's a day that mazloi goiver, the mazl of one person gains strength on his birthday. If this is so on his birthday, the Rebbe says, how much more so is it on the day of Yortzeit? Based on the pasuk, Toiv Yom Hamaves Miyom Hivoldoi. There are advantages and pluses and advantages on the day of Yortzeit, so therefore the day of Yortzeit can definitely be such a day where we apply the concept that his mazel, the mazel of the person whose Yortzeit it is, gains strength on that day. Especially that we're standing in a day of Shabbos. Shabbos Bechlal is the inyan of leading everything to its completeness, to shleimus. That's the whole inyan of Vayechulu Hashamayim Va'aretz. It elevated everything that transpired throughout the entire week, and everything gained to its shleimus, to its completeness on Shabbos. So when this Yortzeit is taking place on a Shabbos, so it's definitely that's a very, very, very special day, and especially regarding the concept of l'katchila riba. The Rebbe says that we have to fulfill it for the entire year until we will come to the next Yortzeit of the Baal HaL'katchila Riba, which will be next year Yud Gimel Tishrei. However, being that we are constantly we are constantly hoping for the coming of Mashiach, that Mashiach will come, so Memela Mashiach will definitely come throughout the year. And we know that Chazal brought the Svarim based on what Chazal tell us, that Trias HaMesim generally will not be right after the coming of Mashiach. However, for special tzaddikim, tzaddikei olam, such tzaddikim that the world has to come on to them, their Trias HaMesim will be following immediately right after Mashiach will come. So we are preparing now, but we're preparing now for the next Yud Gimel Tishrei, for the next day of the Yom Elul of the Rebbe Maharash. That will be in a day when we will already have the Rebbe Maharash with us through the coming of Mashiach and Trias HaMesim, which will transpire until the next Yom HaElul. There's a famous quotation which the Frierdiker Rebbe has related on behalf of the Alter Rebbe. Am bedarfen leben mit der Zeit, to live with the time, and as it's explained, what is the meaning of it, to live with Parshas HaShavua? So we have to find the Shaykhs and Pashas HaShavua also to this concept of L'Katchila Ariba. Find it in the Seder which was read today. Seder which we read, Seder is divided into 7 parts, 7 aliyahs. And by each aliyah, a bracha is made. A bracha mentioning Hashem's name is made at the beginning of the aliyah and at the end of the aliyah. Nonetheless, we know that there's a special stress at the beginning of the Seder. And that is the title of the Seder, and the special stress and importance is in the beginning of the Seder. How does the Seder begin? Seder begins, Haazinu hashamayim v'adabeira, v'sishma ha'aretz imrifi. What is Moshe saying? He's addressing Shamayim and he's addressing Aretz. And he's saying, listen Shamayim to what I will say, and listen Aretz to what I will say. Now as Rashi explains, as we will get into in a few more minutes, that Moshe appointed Shamayim va'aretz, being that they are eternal, in comparison to a bus of Adam. The person lives only his 120 years. However, regarding Shamayim, we cannot say that, Shamayim and Aretz. So he appointed Shamayim and Aretz that they should serve as witness to what he's relating to Yidden. So, what type of an expression is Moshe using to Shamayim? He's saying, Haazinu HaShamayim. Moshe is commanding Shamayim. Listen Shamayim. Moshe himself was not on the level of Shamayim. Even though Moshe may have been very close to Shamayim, nonetheless we find in Chumash when Moshe had to go up to Shamayim, the pasuk says, Vayal Moshe HaShamayim, and Moshe went up to heaven. Nonetheless, what was the attitude which Moshe took? How did he speak to Shamayim? He spoke to Shamayim in an expression of command. It wasn't a request, it wasn't a please. He could have requested it, and Shamayim would have fulfilled his will, his wish and desire. Nonetheless, what did Moshe say? Haazinu HaShamayim, listen Shamayim. Was heißt? It's an approach of L'Katchila Ariba. Moshe, who is lower than Shamayim, is commanding to Shamayim, telling Shamayim what to do. So that's the biggest, as the Rebbe expressed himself, that's the biggest L'Katchila Ariba that could be. And here we find it right away in this week's Seder. This Inyan, Torah, was related to every Jew. Torah has a shaykhs to every Yid. Anoshim, Noshim, V'taf. Every Yid is considered a Ben Avraham, Yitzchak, V'Yaakov. Every man, every male, and every female is considered a Bas, Sarah, Rivke, Rachel, V'Leah. And explaining Chassidus at length that the Inyan of the Avis and the Imois as well, this has a shaykhs to every Yid. And Koyren Avis Elo L'Shloisha. We address only to 3 people that they are our Avis. But the Pshat, explain the Chassidus, Rebbe refers to it many times, based on what Alter Rebbe explains in Torah. What's the Pshat? A father. A father inherits to a child. A child follows the footsteps of a father. In other words, there are many things which are related and inherited, many attitudes, many talents, many skills, many acts of various behaviors, which are usually related from father to son or from mother to daughter. So the same thing, the Avos have this kind of a closeness to each and every Yid. When we're talking about Shvatim, the Yid are divided into tribes. So we cannot say, and every tribe has, every Shevet has his Inyan and Avodas, as explained in Chassidus. So again, Shimon has no shaykhs to Reuven, and Reuven has no shaykhs to Shimon. Levi has his Inyan, Yehuda has his Inyan. However, when we're talking about Avos or Imais, this has a shaykhs to each and every Yid. And every Yid has his shaykhs to Torah. As we say, Torah tziva lanu, meirasha kehilas Yaakov. Torah is explained in the Chassidus, there are various levels in Torah. There's a level in Torah which is an inheritance. What do we mean? As soon as a Jewish child is born, he immediately has his shaykhs to Torah. This is an inheritance. If he's born as a Yid, he automatically has a shaykhs to Torah. Then naturally there are higher madrigas in Torah. It's explained in the Chassidus. There's the madriga in Torah which a person acquires through his yigiyah, through his haravanya in Torah, through his toil in Torah. And then there is a yet and in which the Rebbe gives matana in Torah, a gift of Torah. But the level of inheritance, this has a shaykhs to every Yid. Memela, when we're talking about basic inyanim in Torah, getting back to our inyan, to the inyan of Haazinu HaShamayim, which, as the Rebbe is explaining, how this brings out the lesson of L'Katchila Ariba, this has a shaykhs to each and every Yid. Every Yid has a shaykhs to this concept, and can apply it in his way of Avodas Hashem, the concept of L'Katchila Ariba, above and beyond any type of a limitation. And this is stressed in this week's Sedra. This week's Sedra, Pashas Haazinu, is a special Sedra. First of all, here it brings out how Torah was completed at Tumam until it was completed. And above that, how Moshe Rabbeinu wrote the whole Torah. And Moshe Rabbeinu hid the Torah. There was a Torah which Moshe wrote and he hid, and it's explained in Medrash and in Sfarim, in Chazal. Where did he hide the Torah? But here we have the Sedra where Moshe completed writing the Torah. So it's again a level of shleimus. And we also know that the Maggid of Mizrich, paid a special attention to Pashas Haazinu. It's related in the Sichas that the Maggid used to review Haazinu from time to time. And it's also written the Frierdiker Rebbe Sichas how the Maggid requested that it would be very appropriate for everyone to know Haazinu by heart. So in Mela, we see that Haazinu is a special Sedra, and here in this Sedra we have this message regarding how we are to act as far as L'Katchila Riba. Now we are about to enter, and the Rebbe continues, now we are about to enter Zman Simchaseinu. We are standing before Sukkot. This comes as a continuation from Rosh Hashanah, and the Avodah which we have in Rosh Hashanah, let's explain the Chassidus at length, is the Avodah of Bakese Liyoim Chageinu. Kese means something which is covered and hidden. So it's explained that on Rosh Hashanah, the Levana, Rosh Hashanah is the beginning of the month. So then the Levana is still covered and hidden. So there's the Avodah which we have, Bakese, when the Levana is sugedekt, that's the Avodah of Rosh Hashanah. Then all this leads into the Avodah of Liyoim Chageinu. Liyoim Chageinu is the Avodah of Sukkot. And in between Rosh Hashanah and Sukkot, there are also various levels of Avodah, as explained in Chassidus at length. First of all, we have the whole Inyan, what Rosh Hashanah is all about, Binyan HaMalchus. It's explained in Chassidus how a Yid through his Avodah builds the Malchus of the Rebishter. And then there is the Avodah of Yom Kippur. Then there's the Avodah of the day after Yom Kippur. The Rebbe just spoke when he spoke the day after Yom Kippur, and he referred to it today briefly, that the day after Yom Kippur, the Baal Shem Tov used to refer to it as God's Tog. B'Shem Hashem. That's the name of the title of the day of Yud Aleph Tishrei, the day after Yom Kippur. And then it's also explained how the 4 days between Yom Kippur and Sukkot, these 4 days correspond to the Inyan of the 4 Oisies of the Shem Havai. So when we're talking about building the Inyan of Binyan HaMalchus, which this is accomplished through the Avodah of Rosh Hashanah and the Avodah of Aseres Yemei Teshuvah, what's the Pshat Binyan? When we're talking about construction, about building, it lends itself usually to building a house. What type of a house? A house of Torah, a house of Tefillah, a house of Tzedakah. What's Bechlal the Inyan of a house? So Bechlal is a house. A bayis is defined in the Shas and by Chazal. A bayis is a machse mizerem umimoto. A bayis is a protector. It shields a person from wind and from rain. Was meint das nach Avodah? Jeder Rebbe brought out very geschmackige hezbah. Bechlal, we know that we are to do the mitzvahs as we are commanded from the Rebishter. And the Torah tells us, Lo sifu v'lo sigru. Do not add on any of your own mitzvahs, and do not decrease. We have to fulfill a certain amount of mitzvahs aseh, which we were given, the Ramach mitzvahs aseh, and the Shasam mitzvahs of Lo Seseh. To go ahead and increase mitzvahs, or decrease mitzvahs, this is something which we are prohibited to do. Naturally, we know there are Zayim mitzvahs, the Rabbanon, but then it's not as one of the mitzvahs. When we're talking about Lo Sifu, V'lo Sigru, a Yid is not permitted to go ahead and increase mitzvahs. As Rashi explains, a person cannot go ahead and put on 5 tzitzis, or he can't eat. Then it's not the mitzvah. The mitzvah is how it should be done, 4 tzitzis. Naturally, if a person does a hiddur mitzvah, he's mahadar in the mitzvah, he tries to fulfill the mitzvah perfectly, this is naturally welcome. But to increase mitzvahs or take away from mitzvahs on our own, this we are not allowed to do. So Rebbe is teaching, when we build a bayis, a bias of Torah properly, then this bias leads to it that it protects us mizerem umimoto. Mitzvahs asay, there are how many? 248. So it is Ramach. Zerem is Reish Mem Zayin, 247. Motor is 249. In other words, when we build a proper house, that protects us from getting involved either in Zerem or in Motor. In other words, not to be either, not to transgress the Loisei Sifu, as well as not to be either under Loisigru, but to do the thing properly as it should be done, as it is required from us and as it should be done. And then when we do it in the right way, this year is the year of Tavshim Memtes. And Tavshim Memtes begins right away with a Tav. The Tav stands for Tshuva. This will lead to it that it'll be a year of Tehei Shnas Maisim Toivim. That's Tavshim Memtes, which by fulfilling the Tehei Shnas Maisim Toivim, it would lead to Tehei Shnas Mashiach Toiva. Our Maisim Toivim will lead to the coming of Mashiach. Especially this year, that we're coming from a year of Hakel and a year of Tismach and Tesamach. Regarding Hakel, we find, when was Hakel celebrated? In other words, a year ago, the year following Shemitah, when Hakel was celebrated. Hakel was always celebrated Moitzoi Sukkos, after the first day of Sukkos. In other words, even though Hakel is something which has a shaykhs to the Shemitah year, but when is it celebrated? It's celebrated in the forthcoming year, Moitzoi, first days of Sukkot. What does this show us? This shows us that until we reach the first days of Sukkot, the end of the first days of Sukkot, we still have a shaykhs to the previous year. So Mamela now, we haven't reached Sukkot yet, so Mamela we have a shaykhs to the previous year, which was such an outstanding year, a successful year, and from the success of the previous year, that is where we have the funds to be able to celebrate Sukkot properly for all expenses that we need for Sukkot. And we're again stressing the fact that we're coming from a very special year, from a year of Tismach and Tesamach, a year just like we enjoy and we are happy when somebody brings us to Simcha, when somebody brings us to happiness. The same way we should have a feeling and realize our responsibility that we have to be Tesamach, we have to see to it to bring Simcha to other people as well. Here the Rebbe mentioned the Taich. We say in Slichas, Kippur the Davening, I think we say it. Merubim tzorchei amchom v'daitom tzorah. The needs of your people are many, and their mind is a short one. So there's a famous taich. Merubim tzorchei amcha. Why do your people have so many needs? That is take because daitom tzorah, because they have such a short mind. That is why they have such a desire to so many things, which puts them into a category of many tzarochem, many needs, because of daitam k'tzara. So the Rebbe said, let the Rebbe bench us, not because of a day of k'tzara, of a short mind, but on the contrary, as the Alter Rebbe uses an expression in Tanya, Yitka machshavtoi bechoizek, a person should set his mind firmly and properly. In other words, an inyan not of, which is the opposite of das k'tzara, deya k'tzara, but a real broad mind and a set mind, and the way the mind is set properly. And the Rebbe should bench miyodei hamleya apsucha hakdoisha v'achava, and give everything in a broad way and give us an abundance of everything what we need. And Rebbe again continued that really the year extends not only until Sukkot, but it goes until Shabbos Bereshis, which we still have a shaykhs to the old year, and comes on Simchas Torah. The Kriya which is read in Simchas Torah, we already begin Bereshis. And what do we read from Bereshis? We read how the Rebbe created the world during the first 6 days of creation. Rebbe concluded, let us utilize the remainder The time still has a shaykhs to the old year. This will lead us into the new year. Everything should be in a way of like a tchila ariba. Rabbi mentioned that there's a medrash that Mashiach is sitting and tying knots, that the minute that he's called, he shouldn't have to waste a second and should immediately be able to respond and come. So Zoltak Azoi Zayin, that Mashiach should come right away, and everything should be in a format, in a way of like a tchila ariba, as we just discussed. Rabbi asked to sing Chassidische Nigen and say L'chaim and a mashka mesameches and a mashka what brings the simcha, and again that all of these things should lead to the proper effect of l'katchila ariba and through the coming of Mashiach. Then the Rebbe continued that it's customary to discuss a Rashi in the beginning of the Sedre, the Farbrengen. So the Rebbe referred to the Rashi, which Rashi tells us right away on Haazinu Hashamayim. Haazinu Hashamayim v'adabeira. Why was it that Moshe appointed Shamayim v'aretz, that they should be his witness? Because, as Rashi tells us, Shamayim v'aretz, they are eternal. If you would make this arrangement with a bus of Adam, tomorrow the bus of Adam may not be around anymore. However, if he makes it with Shemayim v'aretz, they are constantly around to serve as witness. So Rebbe raised a simple question, Rebbe portrayed as a simple question, the concept of appointing Shemayim v'aretz as witness. This is not the first time where the Torah is mentioning it. I think it's in last week's Sedra, there's also an expression, V'o'ida bom es ha-shamayim v'sa'aretz. So if Rashi is trying to explain us why Shamayim v'aretz as witness, and not human beings as witness, so the first time that the Torah is mentioning this concept, that is when Rashi should have given the interpretation that Shamayim v'aretz, why Shamayim v'aretz and not Bas of Adam? But Rashi doesn't do that. Rashi waits till the pasuk here, where the pasuk here tells us about Haazinu Hashamayim, v'sishma ha'aretz, v'adabeira v'sishma ha'aretz imrifi, and here Rashi explains why dafke Shamayim v'aretz. So the Rebbe says that when the child who's learning Chumash is first learning, v'o'ida bom es ha-shamayim v'sa'aretz, I will make witness upon them Shamayim v'aretz, but really the witness was not set yet. She's only saying, the pasuk is only saying, Ve'oidaba. So there Rashi doesn't feel it's important to explain it. Once this witness was set, and it was taka arranged that it should be that way, Haazinu Hashamayim v'adabeira, v'sishma ha'aretz imrifi, here Rashi has to explain to the student who's learning Chumash why Shamayim v'aretz and not anything else. You see, because the pasuk V'o'ida b'mes hashamayim v'sa'aretz, that's really not when Moshe is making the arrangement of appointing Shamayim v'aretz as Eitis. There he's just telling us about it, what I will do. V'o'ida b'm, I will make witness Shamayim v'aretz. Once we learn the pasuk where this witness is really happening, and Moshe is appointing Shamayim v'aretz as witness, this is where Rashi is explaining us why Shamayim v'aretz as opposed to any basavada. Also, the Rebbe referred to another Rashi in this week's Sedre, Ki chelek Hashem amoi Yaakov chevel nachlosoi, which is in pasuk Tes. That Yaakov is the third. Rashi explains that Yidden have three merits. They have their own merit, the merit of their fathers, and the merit of their grandfathers. Just like a chevel, just like a rope, she'osi b'gimel gdilim, that's like intertwined. Thank you. The same way, he's referring to Yaakov. Yaakov is being the third, so he has three types of schusim. He has his schus, Yitzchak's schus, and Avraham's schus. What's prompting Rashi? Why is Rashi forced to explain how there are three schusim in Yaakov. So the Rebbe is learning. This comes to a continuation to the previous pasuk. Pasuk Ches says, "Yatziv gvulois amim lemispar bnei Yisrael." The Rebishter placed gvulois, boundaries, amim to the nations, lemispar bnei Yisrael, which later, because of the Yid. So in other words, what the pasuk here is talking about, he's talking about amim. He's talking about the goyim, plural. Usually when we're talking about Yidden, we always find and bring out in Yidden the Meile, the fact, the Achdus in Yidden, to single them out, how they are individualized from all nations. But being that the pasuk here is talking about Yatziv Gvulois Amim, so we're talking about nations plural. So Mamela, the pasuk is also bringing out a Meile in Yidden, how the Meile in Yidden not mitzad the fact how they are singled out, but also a Meile in plural in Yidden, the fact that Yaakov has three schusim, he has his own merit, his fathers and his grandfathers. From this inyan, how the Rebbe was speaking this inyan, the Rebbe got into a length inyan, which is explained, which is heavily explained in Chassidus. There are advantages in single, and there are advantages not in single. For example, very general, which the Rebbe referred to, there's the expression of Yochid, and there's an expression of Echad. What is the difference between Yochid and Echad? So Chassidus explains, Yochid be'ein shein eloi. Yochid means he's the one and only. When you say Echad, Echad means the first. When there's a first, there's a second. There's a third. Echad is the beginning of something. Yochid means to single out that he and no one else. So we find how we refer to the Rebishter with the title of Yochid, and at the same time we also find how we refer to the Rebishter with the title of Echad. Stellt sich the Shaila, Chassidus asks a very big kasha, wouldn't it be more proper to address the Rebishter Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Yochid, than Echad? Echad does not exclude a Sheni Eloi. Chassidus explains, on the contrary, that there are advantages in Echad as well. And the whole union of Echad, how Echad has a Shaykhis, Aleph standing for the Rabbeinu Shlomo, Ches indicating for Zayin, Rekiyim, Va'aretz, and Dalet indicating for the four corners of the world. And therefore the whole idea is to be mamshich from the Aleph, to imbue Getlichkeit, that it should be permeated into the entire world, into the Ches and into the Dalet. Or from another angle, the Rebbe explained it, we find and also explained the Chassidus based on a Mishnah, that Ba'asaram Amoris, the Rebbe created the world. He created the world with 10 quotations. And right away Chazal say, V'aloi b'maimer echad yochel lihibaris. He could have created the world even with one maimer as well. But nonetheless, he didn't. He created the world Ba'asaram Amoris. So what's the pshat? So Chassidus explains that there's advantages, milas, in ribui, in plural, and there are advantages in miut. So Chassidus Tak explains what's the pshat in the Mishnah Ba'asaram Amoris Nivra Olam. Then the Mishnah says, V'aloi b'maimer echad yochel lihibaris, that the Rebbe could have created the world with one maimer. Chassidus teaches that this is what Chazal say, Bereshis Namim Maimahu, that the word Bereshis is also one of the Asaram Amoris. This is the Maimar Echad with which HaKadosh Baruch Hu was able to create the world. And the Rebbe got into explaining it more in details, that in Keser itself there are various madrigas in Keser. There's how we find Keser Malchus, and there's how we find Keser Elyon. So it all lends itself to explain how at times there's a stress on the maila of individualism, of Yachid, and at times there's stress on the maila of Ribui, of plural. And the Rebbe also related it, that it has a shaykhis, relates this to a Zoyar in this week's Seder. So this week's Seder is also talking about Reb Shimon ben Yochai. Reb Shimon ben Yochai, who passed away on Lag Ba'ima. Regarding Lag Ba'ima, well, let's explain. Lag is the same oisius as Gal. And there's a pasuk, Eid Hagal Hazeh. This stone is an aid. This stone is a witness. How one union leads into another. And we also have a pasuk, Atem Eidai, the Rebbe says, you are my witness. What's the pshat? You are my witness. The Rebbe is teaching. The Rebbe said it's a dover niflo, something very, very remarkable, very outstanding. In halacha we know there's a concept of witness, but there are two types of witness. It's explained in Nigla. There is Eidei Birul and Eidei Kiyum. They are witness which clarify a matter for us. When two people have a dispute, we involve witness in order to know whom to believe. These witnesses are called Eidei Birul. They have clarified a certain matter. It's based on what they are saying. We have clarified the situation. We know what's happened. We questioned them. They came and they appeared before the Beis Din, and they told the Beis Din what they know on the story, and therefore they become Eidei Birul. There is a much more powerful concept of Eidus, which is called Eidei Kiyum. Eidus which create. What's the pshat? Eidus which create. Let us take a very simple example. Kiddushin. A man is mekadesh a woman. Kiddushin must be in the presence of Eidus. If it's not in the presence of Eidus, then the Kiddushin are no Kiddushin. Here the Eidus are not only Eidei Birul, not just that they are clarifying a matter. The Eidus here are Eidei Kiyum. It is based on their Eidus that this Kiddushin is in effect. Or let us take the opposite of Kiddushin, a get. Same situation. By a get, the Eidus are not just there as witness that are there to serve the purpose of a birul, of clarifying something. The Eidus are there to create, to put into effect what they are witness on. If there will not be Eidus, the divorce cannot be a divorce. What's the taich now when the Rebbe is addressing himself to Yidden and he's saying to Yidden, Atem Eidai? So we know, Ein Melech B'loi Am. A Melech cannot be unless he has a nation over whom to rule. A person cannot just lock himself up in a room and say he's a Melech. A Melech has to rule over people. And the Rebbe asks, that comes Rosh Hashanah, Shetamli Chuni Aleichem. We shall appoint him as a king over us. When we're talking that the Rebbe is using the expression Atem Eidai, so Kavyochel, the Rebbe is saying that Yidden are, we use the expression Kaviyachal, I'm using, Yidden are kind of creating him, creating the Eibishter. In other words, the Eibishter's kingdom, the Eibishter being a ruler, is based on Yidden. Yidden are the Eidei Kiyum. They are putting the Malchus of the Eibishter into effect. It was here in this Sikha that Rebbe also explained about the meaning of saying l'shem yichud kutsha b'richu l'shchintei, which we say in the morning before Baruch Shama. Rebbe mentioned that by other chassidim, by Pedlish chassidim, they usually would recite a l'shem yichud before every mitzvah that they do. For mitzvahs which are performed even in the middle of the day, they would also say l'shem yichud. By us, we don't. Why? Because the l'shem yichud, which we say in the morning, has an effect on all the mitzvahs which we do throughout the day. Mela, this is the special koyach, going back to the Indian of Atem Eidai. This is the special koyach which was given to Yidden. As the pasuk says, V'niflinu ani ve'amcha. The Rebbe says that Yidden are v'niflinu. In other words, Yidden are outstanding from amongst all nations. Why? Because these are the tremendous koyches which the Rebbe has given to Yidden as opposed to anyone else. That Yidden have this koyach of being Atem Eidai, that they can, it is within their power to put the kingdom of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Kaviyachol, into effect. It was in the third Sikha, and the last Sikha, where the Rebbe again urged very strongly to utilize all efforts possible for the building of buildings, which the Rebbe has been talking about last couple of weeks, and especially for houses of Torah, Avodah, Gemilas Chasadim, that it's now a proper time to see to it that these houses should be built, as well as Anoshim Pratim, even for private people, for private houses. It is now a proper time and an ideal time for people to get involved and to, as the Rebbe used the expression, Eis Livnois, it's a time to build. We even see Begashmi is that a person that owns buildings has a reputation that he can be effective. He can be effective as well also when it comes to utilizing his hashpah which he has. So we see that the person who usually owns quite a few buildings, people respect him. From one Indian into another, the Rebbe referred to the situation in Eretz Yisrael. Rebbe again repeated, which we know is the Rebbe's view, Chas v'shalom, not to give back even any inch of Eretz Yisrael to our enemies. This is something which belongs to Yidden and belongs to the Eibishter, and nobody has a right to give up even, Rabbi used the expression, af shal. Shal is a small piece, even any small piece of land. And the Rebbe says the people that are pushing for it are such, in other words, the people in Israel who are pushing for giving up territory. These are people that we know have ties with Arabs, and it's even known with which Arabs they have their ties. Mamela, how can we have any kind of thought that we should listen to such type of people? And it says such type of an attitude and an approach to go ahead and suggest to give back parts of Eretz Yisrael, this is a feeling which can only come from Sinas Yisrael, from hatred to Yidden. One that has proper Avos Yisrael would never come up with such an idea to go ahead and give back any inch of territory from Eretz Yisrael, to give it back to our enemies. And the Rebbe also referred to the importance of learning Torah, and seeing to it that Rosh Yeshivas put Talmidim on a proper derech of learning, and learn with them Gemara, Tosfos, with Rishonim and Achronim. The Rebbe referred to a expression which is brought by the Rebbe Rashab in the famous Hemshech of Tafchei Shayim Beis. There he writes that all the Svarim that were written until the Marsha, the commentary on Gemara, and including the Marsha, all Svarim which were written to that generation are all based on Ruach HaKodesh. So we can imagine what type of a respect we have to give to all these Svarim. And it's important to see to it, not only to learn Gemara with Tosfos and Poskim and Rishonim and Rambam, but also to make sure that Halachas Svarim are learned, so that we know how to fear sich in Halacha. Leidas Hamayin Sashayasu, simply because we know what we have to do, how to fulfill all halachas, and how to fulfill all mitzvahs. The Rebbe said for that it is needed to learn the Shulchan Aruch and the Shulchan Aruch of the Alter Rebbe and all the commentaries that are in Shulchan Aruch until the Mishnah Berurah. The Rebbe says, and there are those who are raising Talmidim that instead of showing them the proper derech and learning, instead of guiding Talmidim how they should learn Torah, so what they're doing is instead they are implanting within them Sinas Yisrael, hatred to Yidden. And Mamela also this leads to a feeling that they do not appreciate the importance of learning Rambam daily. But the proper way, what is supposed to be done, is to see to it that Talmidim are brought up in the right way, that the right way of Gemara, Rishonim, Gemara, Rashi, and Tosfos, and Rishonim, and then all the Achronim. Ultimately, this would lead to famous expression of the Friedrich Rebbe, la'alta l'tshuva, la'alta l'gula. Let us immediately do tshuva, and this will lead to immediate response of Geulah. And Rebbe also mentioned here the famous expression of the Friedrich Rebbe that we are at the level of tzuputz in the kneplach. It's a famous expression which Rebbe quotes very often. Friedrich Rebbe expressed himself that every Yid is a soldier in the Rebbe's army. And we know that when a soldier is on duty, his clothes have to be clean and pressed properly. The crease in the pants has to be the right way. Everything has to be perfect. So Frierdiker Rebbe said that we are already, everything is perfect. The only thing which we are lacking is, a soldier has on his uniform the shiny buttons. The shine on the buttons, that is, in other words, we're up to the final stage. And what we have to do, we have to make sure, is that we are doing the tzuppets and the kneplach. We have to shine the buttons. And once the buttons are shined, then we are ready for the coming of Mashiach. The Rebbe concluded today in a way of la'alter mamish, immediately ready for the coming of Mashiach. A gute Woche and a guten Yom Tov.